Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make a loaded cheeseburger skillet with some homemade oatmeal cookies. So let's start with our cheeseburger skillet. We're going to start whipping this up, and then we will head to our kind of go back and forth between our cookies and our skillet here. So I have about a half pound of bacon. We used the other half the other day in a recipe. I can't remember what we made, but I'm sure it was delicious. And we're just going to use the other bit. I'm going to snip it up, and we'll let it kind of cook up and fry up. And then we're going to throw in our ground beef, let that kind of cook up. And then we'll take our meats out of the pot, and we're going to start frying up our potatoes, and we'll add our meat back in towards the end. But I don't want it to get too overcooked. Okay, let's get all of this bacon snipped up because I just want kind of like, just nice little strips of bacon in here. And we'll add that, gives you that like loaded feeling and that deliciousness. Let me cut this one last one. There we go. Okay, I'll put these in the trash. I'm going to wash my hands since they're bacony now. Okay, and we're going to turn our skillet on to a medium high. I'm going to do about a 6-7 with our temperature here. And then I'm going to prep my veggies so that when we're making the cookies, I can just pop over here and toss each one in when it's ready. So we're going to cut up one yellow onion. We're going to kind of just slice it up, not super small, but just a good kind of dice on it. We'll also be using green onions, but those will come in later. And then I have some gold potatoes that we will be slicing up kind of nice and thin. There we go. So this yellow onion will just kind of, again, just give a nice little flavor to our ground beef when we cook it up. It will have just a nice, lovely flavor to it. Okay, let's get our potatoes. So I'm using, these are Yukon Gold potatoes, so you do not have to peel them, which will be nice, and they'll keep it kind of nice and tender. So I'm going to cut them in half. I'm actually going to quarter them, and then I'm going to do nice kind of thin slices, just about that thin so that they'll cook up fairly decently, fairly quickly, get tender, but will still kind of have a good body to them. Here we go. Looks like I already did that. And if you're going to use a russet potato, you'll just want to give that a good little peel up. That way their skins don't get too tough in this. Get this going, and then we're going to go in just a second, take a pause, and we're going to start working on our oatmeal cookies. It's like back to school. I was deciding, I was like, oh, should I make a muffin for a quick breakfast for the kids? And I got quickly vetoed that everybody wanted cookies. So oatmeal cookies it is. I think these will be great little snacks to pop in their lunch boxes that are just a little bit healthier than the regular chocolate chip cookie. Especially today was the kids' first day at school. It was a half day. So they're all back now. And they're all like, we're so hungry because they're not used to getting up so early. But summer's over for us here. I know it seems so early. It's just the beginning of August. So definitely seems earlier than it was when we were kids. Yeah. And then today we got soccer practice starting up. My oldest daughter has high school soccer this afternoon, and my other one has her team soccer. So back, it's like summer's over, first day of school, first day of all the new year. So kind of getting back into chaos. There we go. And then next week, Teddy starts his school. So we've got a busy week or so here. I'm going to stir. Let me get my tongs out here, and we'll give this a nice toss and get our bacon cooking up. It already smells delicious. So I'm just spreading it apart, breaking all those little things. You know, we just kind of cut them into strips from the packet. But that way they can all kind of just get their time on the thing and crisp up. And now let's start on our oatmeal cookies. So I'm using my stand mixer here because I find for cookies, I just like a good stand mixer. It just makes it a little bit easier. We're going to start by adding in 2.5 sticks of room temperature butter. That will just allow it to cream up a little bit easier. So we've got 1, 2, which is the same as 1 1/4 cup of butter. And then let me get a knife. We're going to use our half of it. And I'm using salted butter because I think salted butter just tastes a little nicer. And I think in baked goods, salt is good. It adds more flavor complexity in it and kind of cuts away some of the sweetness. So we've got 2.5 sticks of our butter in here. We're going to just start creaming it up. Did I get mine plugged in? Yeah. Okay. So we got our going. I'm going to grab our sugars. We're going to use brown sugar and granulated sugar for this. Okay. I've got it. I just always like to kind of whip it just a little bit before I add my sugars in because I just think it kind of creams in a little bit better. So we're going to add in 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. And this recipe is more heavy on the brown sugar. So we've got 1/2 cup of our granulated. And then we're going to add in 3/4 of a cup of packed brown sugar. So this is a half measuring cup. So I'm going to fill it up and then I'll fill it up kind of halfway. Make sure you pack it in there so you kind of have an accurate measurement. And we're going to need 3/4 of a cup of the brown sugar. Okay. And I feel like the brown sugar being, instead of having equal parts, it gives a nicer flavor with the oats. I'm just going to wash my hands real quick. Got a little bit of brown sugar on them. And then we're going to cream these two together. And while we're creaming these, we're going to stir our bacon. Okay. And we're going to get it nice. And I'm not going to have these to where they're completely crunchy, but I do want most of that fat to be rendered down just a little bit. Because I have a smaller bit of bacon here, I'm not getting as much fat out of it to crisp it up, so I'm going to add in a little bit of butter here. Okay.
Yo has a question for you.
What's for dinner tonight? Let's see. I'm not 100% sure because I have been like not preparing myself for the school year yet. And then I realized my daughter's soccer practice is like 35 minutes away in another town. So it's like they practice in different locations like every single day. And I'm not a big fan of that right now. So I'm like, oh, she gets done at 7, which means I'm not going to get home till 7:45-ish, and so now I'm trying to think, not that we ever eat before that, but now I'm like, oh, I only have a short period of prep time. So I'm not 100% sure what we're doing tonight, but I'm going to narrow it out. I do know we're going to prep up a sourdough loaf for tomorrow to bake up. So I've got at least that part done. But again, I'm not 100% sure yet. Still formulating it. Okay, we've got our butter in there. Now that we have some of that butter, you can see it has some fat in there. It's going to kind of crisp it up. When you're just doing a little bit of bacon on such a big pan, it's not going to have enough grease to crisp it up on its own. Okay, we've got our sugars and our butter creamed together. So now we're going to add in our egg, our vanilla, our spices, and our baking powder. So we're going to add in 1 egg and then a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And I realize I'm like down to the the wire with my vanilla. So I'm hoping I have enough to make this whole teaspoon. Oh, no, this one had enough in it, so I guess I wasn't that low. So a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then we're going to add in a teaspoon of salt. And if you're using unsalted butter, you're going to want to use a bit more salt to kind of make up for that. So we've got our salt. Then we're going to add in a teaspoon of baking soda. So not baking powder, but baking soda. Most cookies use baking soda. It gives it a nice, kind of quick pop on it without getting too puffy. And then for our spices, we're going to be using cinnamon and nutmeg, but just a smidge of nutmeg. We're going to use a teaspoon of cinnamon. And when I say teaspoon, I want like a heaping teaspoon because I really love the cinnamon flavor, popping out in these. So it's a good size. And then for the nutmeg, we're just going to use 1/4 of a teaspoon in here. So you don't need a lot, but that nutmeg is, I always feel like the missing spice when you buy like oatmeal cookies or somebody's made it. If they don't have it, that's what's always missing for me.
So, question. What brand of baking soda and powder do you use?
I use the Clabber Girl. So it's always in these little things. And actually, I think that one's for the baking powder. I think the other one I use is that it's like Rifford or something like that for the thing. It looks the same. I'll grab it out. Is it this? It might still be the same. Let me stir this right here. I'm going to turn it down just a smidge, and then I'm going to grab my baking powder and see exactly what it is. Oh, it is the same. I lied. So it's this brand. I like it a lot on it. Now, I know if people have like that, if they're baking powder, they think it tastes really bitter, you can get ones that are alum free, which have less of a bitter taste to it. Let's get this whisked up in here. Okay. We've got our spices and our baking powder and our egg and everything all put in there. So I'm going to take a pause on our cookies here to look at our bacon here. We're going to add in our hamburger and we're going to cook this up in our hamburger in here. So I have 1 pound of ground beef. And we're going to cook it up there. I was kind of thinking, I'm like, oh, I have just a random pound of ground beef. What should I make with it? And I feel like, the classics are always like spaghetti, tacos. I was like, oh, let's do something a little different. Because if you notice, I like to cook all sorts of things. Okay, we've got our pound. And I'm just going to use my spatula here. We're going to break it up because we want it to kind of be our little crumbles on it so that it will be all spread throughout our little kind of loaded cheeseburger skillet. I know I said today is like the last time I have to cook my older kids' lunch for a while, which means I can get change it up a little bit. I will say, I think my husband and I are a bit more adventurous than our kids at times. So I'm excited. I know this is kind of crazy, but I've been craving this all summer long, is a tuna melt, but my kids don't like it. But I'm like, oh, back to school, I can make my tuna melt now. And I don't have to worry about them belly aching that I made a meal they didn't like. Okay, I'm going to just break it up. You can see it's going to cook up pretty fast here because our oil is nice and hot, but all of that oil will also be delicious to fry our potatoes in to get that just nice flavor in it. So I'm not going to strain it off because that will really kind of make our potato skillet shine. Okay. And now while we have our potatoes still or our ground beef is still a little bit raw in here, we're going to add just a little bit of seasoning. We're going to add a little bit of Worcestershire. So I'm just going to do a nice little drizzle over. It's probably about a teaspoon. You don't want to have a whole bunch where you kind of flood it with a lot of liquid, but that acid will just make that ground beef a little bit more juicy and tender. And we're going to use some onion powder. And this will season up that ground beef really nicely because remember, we're going to remove it out here in just a second to kind of fry up our potatoes. And we're going to want about 1.5 teaspoons of this, so a good shake. And then, of course, our trusty garlic salt. We're going to put about 1 teaspoon or so in here. And a little bit of ground black pepper. And think about how you want like a hamburger. You want it savory. So I'm keeping my spices kind of pretty simple. We'll give this a nice little stir around, and then we'll work on our next part of our cookies. But I can say it smells delicious right now because that bacon and that onion powder and the garlic just smells delicious. And it's something simple, just changing up our basic, ground beef recipes. Here. Okay, we got that cooking. Okay, we've got all of our bases in here. So remember we had 2.5 sticks of butter, a 3/4 cup of brown sugar, 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of baking soda, a teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and a teaspoon of vanilla. So we've got that part done. Now let's add in our flour. We're going to add in 1.5 cups of flour. We're going to mix it in there, and then we're going to add in our oats. So, and I do have my oven preheated to 375 for these cookies. So we need 1.5 cups of flour. So we're going to let this mix up. I'm going to grab my spatula and kind of push down the sides so that we don't have just butter stuck on the sides. Kind of pop it down. And I always say this is kind of a really important step when you're making cookies. You're using that because otherwise you won't get an even mixture of all your stuff. And then when you're scooping, you'll realize that not all of your butter was incorporated. Okay, let's give that a good mix while we go and check on our ground beef over here. We got our ground beef and our bacon cooking. And it looks like it is just about cooked through. I'm not going to overcook it or anything like that because I want it to stay nice and tender and juicy. And we will be throwing this all back in towards the end. So I'm going to turn that off. There we go. So we've got right now in our bowl here, we've got our flour mixed in. So it is looking good on here. Before we mix in our oats, I'm going to scoop out our ground beef. Now you're going to want to use a slotted spatula or a slotted spoon for this because we want to keep as much of that grease in there as possible so that we can fry our potatoes in it, and we'll add just a great flavor. And this is going to be for our loaded cheeseburger skillet. And so this, we have in here a 1/2 pound of bacon and a pound of ground beef, and we season that up with a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, onion powder, garlic salt, and black pepper. And then we're going to throw in our onions here, a little bit of garlic, then our potatoes, let them start sautéing up for this. Again, we want to try to leave as much of that grease in here so that those potatoes are going to act, they're pretty porous, so they'll kind of soak up that fat, but they'll get a nice crispy edge for them and add a lot of flavor. So you don't want to just leave your meat in here when you cook the potatoes, because what will happen is your potatoes will get soft, but they're not going to get a nice kind of crispy edge on it that you want. So definitely want to take it out, and your ground beef will get pretty tough after a while because it will get overcooked. And we want it to stay nice and tender and juicy and flavorful. There we go. So we just about have we got it all out right here. So we'll add that back in later, but I'm going to turn on my burner here. And we're going to heat it up nice and hot. And I'm going to first throw in my onions to let them start kind of just getting a little bit tender. And we'll have them kind of caramelize up just a smidge. And this is, again, is 1 yellow onion that we kind of did a small thing on it. I'm going to coat them in all of that kind of bacon grease, ground beef fat, and a little bit of butter that we have in there. There we go. And I have it over about a 7 now, so I'm on kind of like a medium high. And we're going to let that sit for just a second and cook up. Now we're going to add in our oats for this. And this one, we're using 3 cups of old-fashioned oats. You could also use quick oats for this, but I would not use like a steel cut oat. Those would be really crunchy and chewy and not give a great texture to your cookie. So we're going to use 3 cups of old-fashioned oats. 2 and 3. Slide this right over here. And then we're going to let this mix up. And we're going to let them until it all kind of incorporates. Beautiful. And that's a nice thing about using the stand mixer versus a hand mixer with cookies. Since your batter is, or your dough is a lot thicker, it's just a little bit easier to incorporate. So we've got this off. Now, if you love raisins, you could put raisins in here, nuts in here, cranberries, cinnamon chips, chocolate chips, white chocolate chips, anything under the sun. I feel like oatmeal cookies, especially with just a simple kind of solid base, is such a versatile cookie that you can add so many different things to change the flavors up. Our family's favorite, of course, is just plain oatmeal cookies, no raisins in it. I feel like raisins are like dying. I feel like each generation that comes out, they eat less and less raisins. I always consider like a raisin like the grandma food. But if you love your raisins in here, definitely pop them in. There, I personally do not. Before we roll these out and get these in the oven, just going to give my onions a quick stir here. We are going to pop in a little bit of garlic, and then we're going to throw our potatoes in there to start cooking up. So, got a new jar of garlic, although I don't know if this is going to last me very long. Normally, I get the big one from Costco, but I haven't gone to Costco yet, so I'll do that. But we're going to put in about a teaspoon or so of garlic. And now my rule of thumb when I'm using garlic, I use fresh garlic in recipes that the garlic is the show. So last night we made a shrimp scampi, and garlic is a critical part of that sauce for the shrimp scampi. But in here, it's just a side piece. It's definitely, it adds the flavor that you want, but it's not your show. So that's where I take the convenience of using a garlic, because it's quick. It gives you that flavor without all that work. Now with garlic, you don't need to saute it for very long. Garlic goes from being crispy to burnt in like 20 seconds. So just don't leave it sitting in your pan of oil or your fat for too long. Otherwise, you'll have burnt garlic. We're going to add in our potatoes. Again, this is 4 Yukon Gold potatoes, so I don't have to peel the skin up on them. And we're just going to mix them around and kind of coat them with our, lost the potato already, with our kind of our fat and our oil in here. There we go. I'm just going to coat them up because remember, potatoes are very porous, so they will kind of soak up all of that in there. So I want to make sure they all get coated with it. There we go. So I've got them all around. Now I'm going to spread it out. Got mine on about a 6 now. And I'm going to put a lid over the top to kind of tenderize them and cook them up while we get everything. The nice thing about hex-clad pans is they come with these really nice, they're actually quite heavy, but glass ones, so you can always keep an eye on it. But they have a little steam hole, so you're not going to trap in too much moisture and make it too soggy. This will still give you that crispy bottom, but will help tenderize them a little bit faster. Now let's roll out our cookies. So these are oatmeal raisins. These are not not oatmeal raisins. These are not ones that you have to chill like a chocolate chip cookie. So I'm just taking a little ball and giving them a light roll. The dough is not super sticky, which is also, again, it's nice because then you don't have to roll them, like get spoons to scoop them out or whatnot, or chill the dough until it's kind of malleable. You could use, I know a lot of people use like those, ice cream scoops, or they make cookie scoops. I don't know if I've just never used them correctly, but they've never worked for me. I've actually broken a couple of them trying to scoop it out. So I am just old school, and I just grab with my fingers and do this. But you could also do the 2-spoon methods, where you just take two, spoons and you put them back and forth. But again, I find this is simple and gives you the most uniform cookie, because they're going to be perfect little circles when they bake up. And I'm doing about ping pong ball size cookies. These aren't going to spread out too much. They're going to have a nice little a little bit of a dome on them, which I like because it keeps them really soft and chewy, and they don't get crunchy or crispy. Even after a day or two, they don't get hard. They stay kind of soft and chewy. There we go. And this is also this makes a good amount of cookies. So if your family is like, some of you like oatmeal raisins, some of you like it plain, or you like some other flavors, you could definitely roll out some plain, and then you could add in chocolate chips or raisins or cranberries or whatnot, to give you a little bit of variety. There you go. But these are definitely a family favorite. And I feel like oatmeal is one of those cookies that I feel like they're not as common, of a cookie. I feel like everybody, when they make cookies, it's always chocolate chip. But the oatmeal, I think, is a classic. It's good. And for if you're getting back to school, I feel like it's one of those, it's like a healthier it's not that healthy, but it's a slightly healthier option you can send that you can feel a little less guilty about, because you're going to be like, well, it's like oatmeal. Let me wash my hands, and we're going to put our first batch in. Okay. So again, I have my oven preheated to 375. So these cookies cook a little bit hotter than like my chocolate chip or my Aunt Aggie's, which cook around 350. And that's part of it is because these aren't a chilled cookie, so I want them a little bit hotter. And they cook for just 8 minutes, so they don't take very long to cook, which is really, really nice because you can kind of get batches in and out. So let me put my 8 minutes up on here, and we'll let it go. You might, when they get done, you're going to think, oh, these are not ready. They need to cook longer. Don't cook them any longer, because cooking them longer is going to dry them out. It's going to make them crunchy. You want them to be soft. They sit for about 5 minutes on the cookie sheet, and then they're like perfect. Okay, let's get our potatoes. Can already see some of them getting translucent here, which means they're getting nice and tender. We're going to slide through and give our nice flip. You see how even with that lid on, we're still getting a nice crispy fry on the bottom, which I think makes these just so delicious. There we go. Now, also, one of the tricks for having like your potatoes and whatnot being crispy is you got to not really play with them in the pan. You do your flip, and then you just let them cook. You don't keep stirring them, because every time you stir them, you're taking them off that heat, and then you're losing that crispy edge. Okay, let's get our next batch of cookies. We'll roll these out real quick.
Question. What type of oats are you using?
These are just old-fashioned oats. So I find that they work really well in cookies, but quick oats also work well. Just don't use the steel cut oats. Those will give you a really crunchy cookie, and they just doesn't work for this recipe. But you know what? I just buy mine in bulk from Costco. You can get like this big, huge bag. And I think it's great because I make a lot of granola bars for the kids, and I'm like, oh, I got to get back into it because my kids got to, they bring snacks to school. And I liked, homemade granola bars are really great because they're a lot cheaper to make than you buy at the store. And you can kind of change up the flavors and whatnot in them really easily. So I kind of used through my oats there and then making homemade oatmeal or whatnot. But I just buy a big bulk bag from Costco, and that works well because then they're just kind of versatile. Let's get them rolled up. But these are one of our Christmas cookie, like it's on our list of the cookies we make every year at Christmas. So you have the oatmeal cookies and then, the sparkling molasses. And then I make the Swedish pepparkaka, which is like a spice cookie, like a really thin spice cookie. Butter dreams, which are a shortbread with a maraschino cherry on it, and then chocolate chip cookies. And then every year we always like throw in another cookie or a random cookie, but these are always on our little, like, I do like a one day and I bake all of these cookies up in one day, and it's like mountains and mountains of cookies, and the kids are always stealing this is what it is, stealing my dough. I will say the kids love the dough for this as well. It's just it's got like how there's cinnamon and that nutmeg in it, and it's very mild and versatile. But they love it. Now I only typically, if I'll bake 2 batches at a time, but I'm going to just do the one on the top because I find, and I'm sure you guys have noticed this, your cookies on the top rack bake faster and better than the bottom rack because that top sheet kind of blocks some of that direct heat. So I kind of will just pop one in and around if I'm not making hundreds of cookies at a time. And I think I'm like, these right now, those will be 30 cookies, and there's a little bit left, but I'm sure my kids are just going to eat that instead of me making a third tray of them. But the dough is delicious. But I will say these make about 36 cookies, so about 3 dozen, which is a good amount. But in my family, we're a large family. These will last a day. They'll probably be gone by the middle of tomorrow because, I've got 5 kids and then my nieces and nephews and my parents. So, about 9 people, and they just go fast. 9 people, that's only like 4 cookies a person. So we're going to chop up our green onions here. We'll throw these in just a little bit. Let's pull up our potatoes. Beautiful. I'll slide this right over here. And we're going to put, did I lose it? Always. He held on there. Okay, we're just putting it in with our fingers. He is moving away from me. Okay, we've got our potatoes. You can tell that they are getting nice and tender now because they're starting to get even more translucent. Now, the nice thing about Yukon Gold is they're going to hold their shape really well. They're not going to get super mushy, not like a russet, which I think kind of makes this one nice. Okay, we're going to season these potatoes up, and then we'll put the lid on, let them cook for just a second, and then we're going to add our meat back in, our onions, and a nice layer of cheese. So for our potatoes, again, we want all of these flavors to be really similar with this. I'm just going to use a little bit of onion powder. Just adds a bit more savoriness. And I don't add my spices until the potatoes are almost done cooking because they like to burn at the bottom of your frying pan. And so if you just add them towards the end, you won't have to worry about having any little burnt bits. A little bit of garlic salt. There we go. And then a little bit of black pepper. Now, you could always change up these spices. You could do like a ranch theme one where you use like a ranch seasoning pack to have a more zesty like hamburger potato skillet. But I just like the nice savory one. I think tastes so good. There we go. These are looking good. You can see we've got all these nice little crispy edges on it. And that's what I said. You want to take your meat out because if you put your meat in there while you're doing it, you're not going to get any crispy edges. They'll just be soft potatoes. So I've got all of my bacon and my hamburger going back in here. We're going to just mix this up. Nice to have those flavors together. And then I'm going to throw in my little whiter part of my green onions first. Let those cook off a little bit because they're going to have a bit more of an astringent flavor than my dark green parts. So we're going to pop those on. There we go. Beautiful. Before we put our cheese on, I'm just going to poke back and look. Oh, our cookies are just about to come out. So I'm going to actually put this lid on. We'll go over and grab our cookies. We'll put our next kind of tray in. We'll get those out, and then we'll finish off our hamburger skillet that we have, our loaded cheeseburger skillet. Okay. There. So when I say, you might think, oh, they're not done yet. This is what a done oatmeal cookie looks like. You can see a slight golden brown around it, but it is not overly flat yet. I'm going to pop them right here and get my next batch in. So they've got a light golden brown color on the tops of them, and they're going to be perfect. Now you can't pick a cookie up off the mat yet, like off your tray. They'll fall apart just like with most cookies. You've got to let it sit for about 5 minutes for that butter to firm up after it's melted, but they're going to be perfect. And they're nice. And they've just got that mild golden brown, because if you overcook a cookie, they dry out and then they are very crumbly. They're not as delicious. But again, these are just a classic with, a teaspoon of cinnamon in and 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. That just gives it that little extra oomph.
You have a question? If you add fruit or chips, is the cooking time the same?
The cooking time is the same. You don't need to add any more time or whatnot to it. So yeah, that doesn't add any extra time. So that's kind of the nice thing, that they're very versatile. So you can change it up, and you could even have half those cookies with chocolate chips and half without, and they'd cook up all the same time. Okay, let's add in our cheddar cheese on the top of this. So we'll do our nice little sprinkle over. Because you got to think, loaded cheeseburger. Think about how if you were to do a loaded nachos. So we're going to put our cheese on. It's a nice kind of layer over the top for our loaded cheeseburger. I'm going to just pop our lid on here. And that steam is going to allow this cheese to melt up pretty quickly. And as that is melting up, you get my green onions over here. I'll need about, I think, a minute or so for that. I do have a little bit of my honeydew melon. Now, I told you guys, if you guys were with us earlier in the week, how you don't have to cut up your whole melon at one time, because it can get slimy once you cut it up. You've got to kind of eat it within 2 to 3 days before it gets slimy. If you cover it, I left my seeds in it, everything in it, and you cover it with plastic wrap, you're going to have really just as good as the day you cut it open melon. And I find that just allows you to stretch it, especially if you're not we're a big family, but this melon, if you can imagine, was huge. So even we weren't going to eat one whole melon in the sitting here. So, but leave your seeds in it. Don't scrape out your seeds. Your seeds just help keep that nice and fresh. There we go. And that's what I do with my cantaloupe or watermelon, just because you're not, especially a watermelon, unless it's a small one, like a personal one, you're not going to eat that whole watermelon setting, but don't cut it up at one time, because then it won't stay as nice. Just cut in half and then leave it. And now my trick, we love to eat our fresh melon. I do not like to pay for melon to be cut up at the store. So There's this fun little trick thing that you can do with like honeydew, cantaloupe or whatnot that just allows you to cut it up a little bit easier. So you just take your melon and then you're going to just cut your little slices here like this. And look, when you do that, your melon will lay flat. And then you can take your knife and just slide it right underneath by pushing down into your cutting board. And then you're going to get most of your melon off. And it's really, really easy. Let's pop this over because it looks like this is ready. Look at that. I'm going to turn this off. Look how delicious this looks. And we'll, of course, top it with the remaining green onions. And we've got our loaded cheeseburger casserole here, or cheeseburger skillet, whatever you kind of want to call it. So we'll serve that up in just a second with our oatmeal cookies that, like I said, you can't take them off the baking sheet right away. You have to wait until they've firmed up. Otherwise, they'll fall apart. And I always tell my kids, don't steal them yet. You'll burn your mouth if you try to put them in and eat them right away because they're like 350 degrees at hot. And sometimes I'm always like slapping my kids' hands away because they're trying to eat them. And I'm like, trust me, they're burning hot, especially if you put a chocolate chip in it. Those chocolate chips stay so hot. But I will say, like, I can cut this melon up here in less than 5 minutes, like 2 minutes to cut this up. And this honeydew cost me, I think it was like $3.79, so less than $4, and it was a huge one. So it was thing, but it gets you way more than what you would get at the store in the pre-cut area. Plus, you'll know when it's nice and ripe, so you're not buying one that's like rock hard that looks good but isn't. Here we go. So we'll get this, and then we're gonna serve up lunch. And we've got our cookies. Now you can see our cookies, now that they've set, they've kind of sunken down just a little bit, but they still have that nice chewy dome on it. And that's what, since you don't have to chill these, they don't stay really fat. But you can chill the oatmeal cookie, and then you'll have an even more of a mound if you like that.
You have a question? Do you have a cookbook?
I do not have a cookbook, but we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so you can always go and re-watch our cooking shows and recreate our recipes. We do also offer recipes for our members. We send out a couple each week for them to kind of have and recreate, but everybody's allowed. We put our videos up for everybody. Okay, guys, let's serve up our lunch. We'll do it on here since we'll have our fruit. So here, I'm gonna put all of this out. Let me get a spoon for this. Okay, so today for lunch, we made a delicious loaded cheeseburger casserole filled with bacon, ground beef, potatoes. Look at this, crispy fried potatoes, green onions, cheese. And it's just like, think about a potato, like your potatoes and French fries all in one, loaded together. We cooked our ground beef and our bacon separate so we could fry up our potatoes in that grease to give it that really great crispy edge and that flavor. And then, of course, we added our cheddar cheese at the very end to melt over it. We've got our fresh honeydew melon, which will be a nice little bright thing. And then let's not forget our delicious oatmeal cookie. Look at that golden brown edging on it, which will be a perfect dessert to go with our loaded cheeseburger skillet. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day to show you what we're making and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you just have to go to that link, search for what we made, loaded cheeseburger skillet, and then you can cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront where it has all of our cooking gadgets, our baking sheets, everything that we have in there. for you guys to check out if you're interested in what we use, like our HexClad pan, our baking sheets. I've got my next batch of cookies coming out, but we have all of that in there as well. But again, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.